done this before. So like seriously, just you popping up, I'm like, magic.
I'm so happy for you and excited for you and honored to be your first test subject.
Yes, yes, I'm excited for you to be here. So before we start, is there a haircut happening here, or your hair's just like okay? I think it's just like hanging on. There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if you
Did
had
it
to
look
like
good when you thought it was a haircut?
It did. I was like, did you cut your own hair? Because I know people have been doing that. So
I would do it. I have no problem doing that, but I want to grow it out. So
okay.
Lucky me.
Well, thanks for joining. I just want to set the scene for anyone who maybe did not hear the announcement on Monday and they just are stumbling into an Instagram Live with me. You are stumbling into the first of 10 sessions on a series called FreeFall Friday, where I just have conversations with some people in my life who I feel have done something interesting or courageous or just inspiring. And I want to get their stories out into the world because I just know that there are other people in the world who might be in a similar boat and might have similar thoughts or fears or doubts or concerns. And sometimes just hearing someone else's story can be the impetus to take the leap themselves. So that's what this is. Amanda's my first guest. And Amanda, I brought you here because you were the person who introduced me to the term free-range human. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. I'm just laughing at Haley. FreeFall Friday! That's right.
Yeah!
So before you jump into your specific story, Amanda, can you just give a generic overview or definition of what it means to be a free-range human? Because some people might not have heard that term before. I know I hadn't.
Yeah, so I know I introduced you to that term. I did not make up the term. Where I became familiar with it, a friend of mine introduced me to the term. And when it was somebody who I worked with at my very last full-time job prior to the one I have today, but like we'll get to that. That's like
right.
sort of like spoiling the ending. There's a book that I actually never read, but
okay.
It is all about the concept of kind of breaking free from the routine, not the boundaries of 9 to 5, but also the boundaries of like sitting on the same train, on the same commute, in the same cubicle, doing the same thing day in and day out, and breaking free from that routine to really focus. Because when you settle into routine, and routines are nice, they're comforting, they're comfortable, and they give you a sense of security. But oftentimes the trade-off is you lose that spark of joy in doing something that you truly want to do.
Nice. I didn't know there was a book. Now I have to find that book.
Yeah.
You don't know the name right now, do you?
It's called Be a Free-Range Human.
Well, that's easy to remember.
I have downloaded the book. I read a little bit of it, but I'm like, I think I get it.
That's like your thing, Amanda. You're like, yeah, I got it. Landmark, for example.
I guess so. Yeah, kind of.
Love it. Okay, so tell us what'd you say?
I said, give me the bullet points. That's all I need.
There's actually an app. There's like a whole app for books, and it just is like it's like 15 minutes for self-help books, and it just tells you all the main things you need to know to start like enacting it in your life. So I'll send that to you.
Good to know. Thank you.
So tell us your specific story and start with what were you doing before you took your free fall, before you became free-range human, kind of just set up what was your career like and what were you thinking before you took that leap?
Sure. And I, really now when I think about this concept of a free fall from you, I wouldn't even say that becoming a free-range human was the first free fall I took, but it's the one that I took at the time that we're talking about. And at the time I was working for a tech company. It was sort of like a mid-stage startup as the VP of marketing. And it was kind of the latest in a series of similar jobs that I had where I started to notice I was getting kind of bored with the job after a few months. And I noticed that this was an ongoing pattern. So I started to toy with the idea, and I talked to the person who was my work spouse at the time, who was the person who introduced me to the book and the concept of being a free-range human. And my work spouse worked in a creative field. He was he did creative for the company I worked in, but a lot of times people who are designers or creative directors or art directors, they very often and very easily, it's very, normalized in that field to be a freelancer or to be a consultant. So he was like, you could consider, looking into that kind of a format for your career. So I started to talk with a bunch of people. I chatted with a person I went to business school with who, as I was thinking about this career change, he had started a business and was like, I could use some help and I can't hire somebody full time. So things just sort of started to line up. So that when I did leave that job, I had this client as my first client lined up to give it a whirl, and to really hone in on the very specific problem he wanted me to solve, or the very specific challenge that he was going to overcome, as opposed to like, you're going to come in and you're going to have this job title and now you're going to do that job title. Right. So it became very focused on like what the specific work was, which was very, very interesting to me.
Yeah. How long were you still keeping your other job before you took that leave?
No,
you just went for it?
I just went for it. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me, what were what thoughts were going through your head? Was there anything that you were afraid of before doing that? What'd you get in order?
Yeah. So I talked to a few people. I like to say sometimes I just jump from one thing to the next, but I did have many conversations. I chatted with a friend of mine who I had worked with previously at another job, and at that job where I was working full time again as a head of marketing, and she was the head of product, but she was there as a consultant. So I asked her about her life as a consultant, and she was like, just be ready that there's going to be times when you're really busy and there's going to be times when you're not, and you have to go into it with that expectation and not worry about it, especially coming from a very regimented routine that a 9-to-5 full-time job will give you. Her advice was just go with it, and just don't let the downtime discourage you. So there was that piece of advice that I totally heard and internalized that was still very hard for me to follow through on once I started consulting. And then the other thing I was worried about, which is I would say is the number one thing that people ask me about when they consider switching to consulting, and I even want to pause to let viewers guess what it is.
I already know what I think it is, but
what do you think it is? What do you think it is?
Well, no, I think that's actually a good idea. Throw it in the chat. What do you guys think is the number one thing people ask when someone's about to leave a full-time job to go into consulting? Da, da, da. I'll say mine and I'll let some people throw theirs in too. Don't be swayed. But sure. I mean, my biggest thing is I'm thinking finances, insurance, that type of stuff. What did you have in place, especially knowing that they said there will be gaps in between your clients potentially?
Yeah. So
Erica said, do you have a huge savings?
Yeah, I had some savings.
Enough money. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing that kind of and I'm going to talk about some coincidences in life that lined up for me that I will acknowledge were very lucky for me. So at the time when I was working full time, I made a very good salary. I went to business school in order to be able to get the kinds of jobs that afforded me a lifestyle that I knew I knew I very likely had to give up. So around the time that I was thinking of making this jump, a friend of a friend was vacating her apartment in the city, and it was rent controlled, and only wanted to sublet it to somebody kind of within that trusted circle.
Yeah.
So I was able to line up housing that was much, much cheaper than what I was paying for. And I had some savings as well. But also because I had a client lined up, I already knew I had income lined up. And I would say, oh my God, I'm loving all these questions and I really want to answer all of them, but I'm not I only see 2 at a time and they're already leaving.
No, yeah.
We'll go back.
I got them.
We'll go
back
in
a second.
Okay. So the number one thing that people asked me that I was also concerned about was health insurance, because health insurance was a big mystery to me. It was a thing that I would show up at work and somebody in HR would give me paperwork and I would sign it. And to this day, I need to really think through what the definition of a deductible is, because it's just not something I've internalized. So that required a ton of research, and I ended up getting health insurance. Well, one, I had COBRA for 18 months, which you have to pay for, but at least it's a continuation of the benefits you're already paying for. And despite the fact that I said continuation of benefits, that is not what COBRA stands for. And I straight thinking we were together when we learned.
Yep. Yep.
It stands for something really strange. I saw Molly Shoemaker joined, and she works in. Oh, my cousin Dane just joined. She works in HR, so she probably knows the answer to that.
Benefits.
What was I talking about?
Health
benefits. So I ended up after Cobra. I have health insurance off of the New York State Exchange.
Got it.
It's expensive. I'm not going to lie. It's
Yeah.
expensive, and I am a single person with no dependents, and it's expensive. So
Yep.
it's.
I played around with it for a few years too, and it's way more expensive than you would think it would be. But
it's more expensive than you think it would be. Also, I will say, at the time when I made this jump, I was in my late 30s, so I'm not, a very resilient 25-year-old. So I picked insurance kind of planning. You have to plan for what your current life situation is. And many people who I've talked to, they're married or they have kids, and they're like, I need to think about people other than myself. And I wasn't in that position. And
right.
So I fully acknowledge that. So, I was able to pick the solution that was right for me. I'm going to say more things that are kind of addressing some of the questions that I saw.
Yeah, there was one I really wanted you to hit.
Yeah. What is it?
The chart. How do you know what to charge your clients? Because I'm in like a coaching circle, and that's the number one question is like when you want to jump into being a coach, how do you know what to charge? How do you know what's fair? How do you know make sure that you're, and not just coaching, like any type of person who wants to start their own business, how do you know that you're not shortchanging yourself, things like that? So I'm wondering.
Absolutely. I will say not shortchanging yourself is very important, especially if I'm talking to women who are thinking of doing this, because I think that is a very common mistake. Not mistake, but a very common sort of like settling into what you've been told your value was and perpetuating it for yourself. So a couple of things, I mean, every industry is different, so there's no way I could give you one blanket answer. But I came into consulting now being a consultant for people for where I used to be the client. So I had for myself a way of evaluating whether a service was valuable to me. So I was primarily, or at least I started out in marketing consulting. Mm-hmm. So if in marketing, you just have to make sure, you just need to determine the value of what you're delivering and price it accordingly. And also like set a value for your time. So depending on how long you think that deliverable is going to take, you could either charge by the hour or you can charge for the deliverable accordingly. Mm-hmm. But in marketing specifically, you could also charge per performance. This isn't exactly the kind of marketing I was in, but like, let's say you're like, I am a consultant and I want to run this campaign for you. And if this campaign makes you X amount of dollars, you pay me 10%, 15%, 20%. And it's going to differ by market. But the other thing I will also say is when you get started, you might take clients who are in your personal network, who are friends of yours, who are very much like, they're doing you a favor, but you're also doing work for them. So you might feel compelled to give them a break in what you charge. Mm-hmm. By all means, do that. But when set the standard for what you want to charge, and anytime you give a break, always reflect that in your contracts and in your invoices, so that the value they can see the value of what you're providing versus what they're actually paying for it, so that you'll never find yourself in a position where it's like, well, wait, you only charged me this for this thing. Why are you charging me more now?
Yeah.
So I think that was another piece of advice actually. One of my advisors gave me that I really took with me,
which I think is so important, because especially you might get new business through word of mouth, and so if they're saying, "Oh yeah, I got this from someone for X amount of dollars," and then you want to charge your full fee, then it's like, ugh. So I think it's really important to be upfront with that. I'll also say in terms of pricing, I got really good advice from a coach, like an experienced coach once, that just, you have these like this internal tension of how much to charge and this feels like too much or whatnot, but you'll often find that people are willing to pay that, and if they are willing to pay that, you shouldn't feel badly about it, because you are offering a service, whatever that is, and if someone is willing to pay it, like that is what that's kind of how our country runs. And so to stop having these feelings of insecurity or imposter syndrome and whatnot, like you are obviously offering value. And so, you start running with that.
Yeah. I mean, even more practically than that, companies have budgets that cover the thing that you are providing them.
Mm-hmm.
So just, remember that. They're not making up money in order to pay you.
Exactly.
These budgets exist, and they need to get the value out of it. And as long as you can show them it's a great value and it's going to help their company, I think it's also really important to show that there's, longer term value for what you're providing.
Yeah. So Amanda, I promised that I wouldn't make these super long. So I want to take us to the other side of your free fall, meaning I know now you're kind of, I still think of you kind of free range, but you're not fully free range. So you can explain what that is and what you're doing.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I want you to kind of spin that with what benefits do you feel that you gained from that experience? So regardless of what you're doing right now, what did you take from that experience, or what lessons, did you carry over?
Yeah. So when I started consulting and at that point, really only had exposure to, tech companies in the startup corporate world, there was there was one way of thinking where there was a distrust of consultants, and there are other ways of thinking where it's like not everybody needs to be a full-time employee of this company in order to contribute. So I definitely had to intentionally find the clients who were embracing the philosophy that not everybody needs to be a full-time employee. Mm-hmm. Some of them were like way on that side. They were like, everybody should be a consultant. So I, in my free range humaning, which allowed me to do, one of the reasons why I started consulting was because I wanted to also have the time to be able to work on things that I was really passionate about. So as I was exploring this new career, I was spending more and more time contributing to a nonprofit that I had become a part of called After Work Theater. And the thing that I kind of remembered about my experience in helping this organization is one of the things that got me bored with some of the companies was, and all the companies I work for, many of them were mission driven. And I would remember being really sold on the mission when I was interviewing, and then start to kind of realize I wasn't feeling as passionate about it as some of the other people. And I felt a lot of actual jealousy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm just not as passionate about this, and I want to be working on something that I'm passionate about. So I was able to spend time helping out After Work Theater. And I can go on and on and on, but I volunteered with them at first. I was on the board of directors. I started working part-time. So, After Work Theater was one of my clients. But then, my very good friend and founder of the organization announced he was leaving the company to kind of spend more time with his family and pursue other projects. So long story short, I'm now the executive director of this organization, and I am officially a full-time employee. But the thing that has landed me on the other side is this is also a company that really embraces people finding joy in their work. And also by the nature of the fact that a lot of what we do is after work, my hours are strange. So this is not a 9-to-5 job by any means.
Yeah.
So and the company and the board of directors has been very open that by all means, pursue other pursuits that make you happy. This is your job, just do your job, but also do whatever else you want to do. And while I don't have any other projects right now outside of After Work Theater, I know that I can. And I know that that kind of a philosophy is really in alignment here. So, and I think that's shifted in the workforce a lot over the past, I don't even know how long I've been, maybe 6 or 7 years. Maybe it's less than that, maybe more like 5 years. That I've been, been a free range human.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I still which we kind of we didn't even touch upon, but just you work from wherever you just need a laptop and Wi-Fi. Would you say?
Now I work from home.
Now yes. Now we are all working from home. But in theory, you could go to a beach and work if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And just like you said, kind of set your own hours as needed. Obviously, you have a team that you work with, so you have to make sure that you're can have meetings and things with them. But we kind of glossed over just some of the benefits of being a free range human. I feel like you still have a lot of those, even in this new role.
Yeah, actually, I was about 2 years into consulting free range humaning before I realized I hadn't taken a vacation. And I was like, this was the point. Why am I not going on vacation? So I might be even been with you. I don't know. I took a trip with some friends, and I was like, "This is my first vacation I took." You know,
which I will say, I mean, I'm just going to speak for myself. You obviously like take time to take vacations, but I felt like when I was doing free range humanist, I didn't need a vacation as desperately as when I was sitting in an office from 9 to 5. You know what I mean? Like my breaks were built in throughout my routine, and it was just part of my lifestyle. So there wasn't this like build up at the end of 4 months of like, oh my gosh, I need a break. I need to get out of here. You know, I don't know if you felt that too.
And I think that's it. But the thing but I still wasn't traveling. So like travel is different than vacation, right?
Yes, true.
So I did not feel as much of a need for a vacation, but I still wanted to travel and see other places.
Yes. So. Which is that was a big part of my impetus to go live in Paris, was because I knew I was about to head back into a full-time role. And I was like, you know what? All I wanted to do in becoming free range human was go and work in another country and feel like super cool.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't even about just traveling and living in Paris. It was about, I wanted to go work in Paris. And so I spent my last month there, you know, working remotely. So
I'm so in awe of. I love that you did that.
Well, when we can all start doing things again, you will do the same, I'm sure.
We'll see. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I have a laptop and give me Wi-Fi.
That's all you need. Yeah. So, first of all, Amanda, thank you so much for joining today. This was super helpful. I learned things about your story that I didn't even know, so I'm sure
thank you for having me.
Learned a lot too.
I learned things about myself just by talking about it. I'm not even kidding. I think it's important for people to, you know, always continue this journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
It never ends. It never ends. Yeah.
So what I'm going to ask you to do, which I didn't tell you about this, but I'm putting you on the spot for like 30 seconds. You know next week's guest, which is Dewey.
Oh, amazing.
And if you could just share briefly why people might be interested in coming and hearing about Dewey next week.
Is it about his, you know,
Yeah.
So my great friend Dewey actually and I have a similar professional background in that we both work in marketing and advertising. We used to work in marketing and advertising, but he's an amazing piano player. He's been a music director for After Theater, actually, and that's where I met him. But he started a business called Dewey's Piano Party, which has changed a lot. You know, I think in the original, like, I think he used to do pop-up parties at bars and private parties. But obviously that has all changed now. And he's become like a very popular TikTok star.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's TikTok famous now.
Yeah, he's TikTok famous, but he's been able to pivot really successfully and with ease with all of the changes. But yeah, oh my God, I'm so excited. I can't wait to watch.
Yeah, so next week's Dewey. Well, that is it. Thank you for everyone who came and watched. Amanda, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.